Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. This is a DFS preview for the 2021 Valero Texas Open. Now, what these preview videos are meant to do is provide a wide-angled look at this week's tournament. So it'll cover general tournament information like the tournament fact sheets, weather, and the format of the tournament. We'll also look at golfers with the best course history, the best recent form, and the best grass stats, and then determine if any of those stats really matter with the bucket system. And then at the end, I'm going to look at historical salaries as well as optimal lineups to provide kind of the best base or the best salaries to anchor your lineups around. So it'll help you determine, should we go stars and scrubs, find golfers in 10K and 6K, or pepper the 8K range and build more of a balanced lineup. So you can find timestamps in the description below. Also, those timestamps are also found in the progress bar. They're cut up into segments, so if you hover over them, it'll tell you what those timestamps are. All right, let's go ahead and dive into this. I have the tournament fact sheets up. We're all obviously Valero Texas Open, TPC San Antonio Oaks course. I believe this golf course has been played at the Valero since 2010. I'm not absolutely positive, but I'm pretty sure. For as much as my stats go back to 2013, it's been played at this golf course. So to me, that's all that matters. It is a par 72, 36 on both nines. It's pretty standard, obviously, and 7,400, well, it's basically 7,500 yards. That is also pretty standard when it comes to a par 72. That's basically average. Now, the stimp meter is running at an 11. I can't remember if these are undulating greens, but if they're not, that's pretty slow. 11 is kind of on the slower end of the stimp meter on PGA Tour events. So if you have those stats available, like slow greens or anything like that, definitely consider that. I'm not going to really go over the course statistics, but you can obviously see some good pieces of information here. The one that I usually like to look at is the number of holes water is in play, because obviously water presents penalties, the opportunity for penalties. And some of these golfers are pretty wild sometimes with their accuracy. So knowing how many holes have water in play will kind of give you a good idea of who to kind of fade and who to be comfortable with, basically. And right now, with 3 holes in that has water in play, I don't think that's really that big of a deal. The real big piece of information that I find important is the turf grass. Now, some people will argue that turf grass does not matter. I couldn't disagree more, because there are golfers that grow up with Bermuda that look into reading the grain of the grass, but once they come onto bent or even ryegrass or even POA, that grain isn't prevalent, not nearly as much as Bermuda. So they might see grass growing into them and be like, this is going to be slow, and they're just going to, jack it way on by. It matters. And if you've played on the different types of grasses that like I have, it matters. So those that don't find, comfortability on, some of these PGA pros have comfortability with one grass or another, probably aren't doing enough listening to what pros say on tour. Maybe some of the stats don't really provide, the greatest detail, or not so much the greatest detail, it might not represent that within the stats, but I'm not sure if we're looking at the right stats when determining, looking at grass stuff. Because at this golf course, much like last week, this has it's Bermuda grass, that's your base layer, and it's overseeded with POA. That was much like at the Austin Country Club that the World Match Play was played at, or the WGC Match Play. That was really weird. If you guys watched and you saw yellow grass in the rough with sprouts of green, I'm pretty sure that is the Bermuda coming out of dormancy. I don't believe they really overseeded the rough. I think they just allowed it to be dormant. But that's how grass looks as it's coming out of dormancy. So that is how I feel this course is going to set up. We're going to have that yellow rough with little spots of green, and that's kind of like a mix between the two. Not so much a mix between the two, but if we think about the greens having POA overseeded on it, if Bermuda's starting to sprout out and starting to grow coming out of dormancy, it's going to like be a mix. It's going to be a hybrid between POA as well as Bermuda, which with that, how do we determine which grass to go with? Personally, when it comes to any grass coming out of dormancy, I don't personally have the experience to tell you what that's like. I'm not even going to guess, because if there was, like 2 types of grasses, I should say, if a green was seeded with 2 types of grasses, I would tell you which one is the more dominant one. When it comes to Bermuda and POA, I know POA is an invasive grass, and POA will take over a golf course if it's not treated. But since this is overseed with POA, I'm guessing it's going to be like a hybrid of the two, because they want POA to disappear. And I mean, this golf course isn't going to grow in perfectly with Bermuda by just allowing it. They have to reseed with Bermuda, and the fact that it's saying it's overseed with POA means that they have not yet, reseeded back with Bermuda. So I think it's best to go with POA, but I don't know how much confidence I really have in that. I'm using POA, and I suggest you guys to also look at POA stats. But if you want to do a mixed model between POA and Bermuda, I have no issue with that at all. You can see some other additional notes here. Obviously, hole number 5 was extended a little bit to make it 401 yards. So it's just adding a little bit more distance to that hole, which I haven't looked at hole 5 yet. I don't know what it looks like, but 401 isn't very long. I don't know if it's really going to matter. The course architect is Greg Norman. There have been Greg Norman courses used on the PGA Tour, so perhaps looking at some of those courses and trying to find how some of these players in the field have done might be beneficial. Okay, let's move on. The next piece of information I want to talk about is the weather. Obviously, we are in San Antonio, so I'm not tricking you guys into what the weather is like. We want to be looking at Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and really paying attention to what the wind speeds are going to be like. This is your average mile per hour. I would advise you guys on Wednesday night to see if any of this changes, because if there is, high winds in the morning or in the afternoon, I'm sure most of you guys have heard this throughout the industry, but this tournament is kind of it's the trademark tournament, basically, of tee time splits. I believe someone in the industry won a GPP by just doing all morning golfers or all afternoon golfers of one wave. And because there was a tournament, or there was 1 year that this tournament played where the morning wave had to deal with 20, or actually 30 to 40 mile an hour winds. That might be an exaggeration, but it was extreme. There's an extreme difference between morning and the PM wave, where most of the guys in the morning wave on that Thursday ended up missing the cut, because there was a scoring average discrepancy between morning and afternoon of 4 strokes. 4 strokes difference between golfers going off in the morning and golfers going off in the afternoon. That's on average, which is ridiculous. 4 strokes is the highest differential we've ever seen on tour. So this tournament is the trademark for doing AM PM splits, or stacks, really. I don't advise that. It only happened 1 time in the last 4 years. I mean, this tournament can get gusty, but I'm only telling you guys because it's a possibility. If you want to allocate a percentage of your lineups to being AM PM, keep it under 10. Keep it under 10%. Don't get crazy with it. I don't know. I have really strong takes against it. I think it's dumb, but I'm going to leave it at that. We're not going to talk more about it. Just letting you guys know. But it looks pretty tame. Basically, 1 mile an hour almost equals 1 yard. I believe at the World Match, or the WGC Match Play, they had they were showing the wind and how the distance is actually affected by it. So it showed actual distance versus I don't know, the laser marked distance. I can't think of how it was explained, but basically a 12-mile-an-hour wind right into a golfer's face ended up adding 15 yards. So it's not a perfect 1-to-1, but it's pretty darn close. So if we're looking at 12 miles an hour, that's basically a club difference of wind, which does make a difference. It does. But again, these are average miles per hour. Some of these golfers might be faced with 6-mile-an-hour winds, which isn't going to really be that big of a deal. But perhaps you want to find wind golfers. If you have a website you go to find that information, it's not going to be terrible. But just want to give you that heads up, give you that piece of information so you can make decisions on it on your own. Okay, let's move to the next piece. I guess what I want to do is talk a little bit about, not a little bit, but just add some additional pieces of information with this whole general tournament information. DJ, Dustin Johnson, has withdrawn from this tournament. He added this tournament right after he was eliminated from match play. And then basically this kicked out Rayne Gibson. And then Rayne Gibson was added for another reason. And then he was kicked again and then was added once again. Had DJ not just simply entered this tournament, Rayne Gibson wouldn't have had to have gone in between being out of this tournament, into this tournament, out of this tournament, back to into this tournament. DJ basically, I think it was sour grapes when he lost and was like, I need a good performance before the Masters. And by the way, if you didn't notice that, or if you didn't know that, the Masters is next week. So I think he wanted kind of something to give him good vibes heading into the Masters, like a good finish here at the Valero Texas Open. But ultimately he withdrew, so do not play him if you made dummy lineups or placeholder lineups with Dustin in it. Make sure you go ahead and replace that, or replace him with someone who's actually playing. Some other notes are some additions from the Monday qualifier. Sam Fedoni made the cut, or is being added to the tournament, as is Patrick Grimes, Tane Lee, Rayne Gibson, as I just talked about, and JJ Killeen. So that'll round out your field of 144 golfers. So there will be 144 this week, and those are your 5 additions with DJ withdrawing. There were originally just 4 positions available. DJ withdrawing made it 5, and those were your 5 golfers that will fill in the tournament. I don't have anything other than that. Let's go ahead and get into, actually one more piece of tournament information. Target score. I go over this every single week because to me, knowing what the target score is of the winner will help us determine how difficult this course is to score on and what type of golfer do we want to get. Like, do we want to roster? Do we want to roster grinded out golfers who make pars all the time despite whatever the conditions are? Or do we want to find birdie makers who light up, scorecards? I'll say this. You see 2019 and 2018 as, pretty low scoring events. 20 under for Corey Connors in 2019, 17 under for Andrew Landry in 2018. But if we go back past that, we really only see 12 under being kind of your average score for the winner. Meaning this is kind of a tougher test, and a lot of it comes down to the weather. I don't have notes as to how any of these, these tournaments, any of these years, I should say. I have no notes to say whether it was windy, rainy, or anything like that, but you can see what the scores were. Trying to think. I think it was this year when it was extremely windy, and that was where your tee time split was. So in 2015. So that's actually going back 6 years ago. We haven't really seen a tee time split since 2016 or 2015. But yeah, 12 under has been the typical average finishing position at this tournament. Obviously, the 2 years, the most recent 2 years of results would show that it played a little easier. And if fans weren't back, I would also say you could expect lower scores. Because if you remember in the beginning of the year, as I was talking about this, to me, having no fans just really, it didn't provide a lot of pressure to some of these golfers, and they just lit up the scorecard. There were lower than usual scores for the winner and also the top 10. But I think at this tournament, we're going to see a target score around 15 to, I'm going to say 14 to 17 under, which means it's going to be right in that middle point of, you know, a birdie fest and a grinded out type of tournament. So really, it's wide open. And one thing I usually never discuss, and I think, I kind of forget to do that. I'm not sure why this is here. Anyways, is the cut information. So I'm just going to go over and look at the cut. We have even in 2019, 2 over in 2018, 1 over. Actually, I'm sorry. This is what missed the cut. It would have been even in 2017. It'd have been 1 over in 2018, and it would have been 1 under in 2019. Scrolling over to 2016, would have been even. 2015, here was that one tough weather split, and that was 6 over. 3 over in 2014, and 1 over in 2013. So if you say you're playing on statement games or you have any kind of prop bet or anything like that, I think the cut's going to be 1 over. I would assume we're going to see something around 1 over. So again, if you know golfers, or if you have the data to see most golfers Thursday and Friday's rounds to see if they average, you know, under par or par, anything like that, they might be kind of a safer bet to go with. Okay, let's go into the best course history. So I have this sorted by best finish or best average at this tournament with golfers in the field. So P just means playing, and this is what we have in the field. Ryan Moore has the best course history at this tournament. He has 3 events played, 2019, 2018, 2017, with 2 top 10s. So, you know, Ryan Moore, PGA he hasn't had enough starts to have PGA strokes gain data calculated. I'm not sure where he was in the beginning of the year. He has played in the last 4 or 5 tournaments. So he hasn't had a good finish. Let's put it that way. But here, maybe it turns around, because this is obviously a course he is familiar with and enjoys, just based off of his average finishing position. Then we have Corey Connors, which is your defending champion, technically. Last time this was played is 2019, and he was the winner. He has 13.5, 26 was his worst finish. I'm not going to talk about some of these guys. In fact, I'm not going to talk about most of these guys. I'm just going to bring out some notables. So basically anyone who has more than 3 events played, or more than 2 events played, I'll talk about. Charlie Hoffman, this is pretty good. 64th was his worst finish, and that was in 2018. He's also riding some good form, so his course history, I think, would be a golfer you want to play. I would definitely consider Charlie Hoffman this week. Jim Furyk is in this tournament. Now, Furyk just disappointed us at the Honda Classic, missing the cut by 1 shot. If this is that in between, Furyk is more of a grinded out golfer. I think Furyk would be a decent play. I'm not too worried about the missed cut, but we obviously will get into the bucket system to determine if, whatever range he fits into, whatever bucket he fits into for recent form, maybe we'll see if that gives him a leg up or not. Jimmy Walker is a guy, he's obviously won here before. He has a missed cut. I guess without that missed cut, his average would be 15.83, which would be 4th on this list. And first on this list for golfers who have more than, basically 6 events or more. However, obviously he does have a missed cut. He also has been battling Lyme's disease for a very long time. I personally don't ever trust Jimmy Walker anymore. Unfortunately, because of his Lyme's disease, he just can never put 4 rounds together. So Jimmy Walker usually isn't a golfer I'm looking to roster. Kuchar is an interesting play this week because he just came off of a 3rd place finish at the match play last week. And we'll get into the recent form. Kuchar, after finishing inside the top 5, top 4 of match play, coming to this tournament doesn't deter him. He has a top 10 finish after finishing inside the top 4, making it all the way to the semifinals for match play. So don't be deterred by his match play, like how long it took him to play or anything like that. I think he's going to be good. Zach Johnson's another guy who has multiple events played here with decent recent form, or decent course history, I should say. I'm not going to talk about the rest of the guys. Let's see who has the most top 10 finishes in this tournament or in this field. Charlie Hoffman and Ryan Palmer. Now, we didn't even talk about Ryan Palmer because his course history average wasn't inside the top 20, top 20 of this field. But if you take a look, if we remove these 2 missed cuts, and I know that's kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's just tilting it in our favor. 17.40 would be his course history average. Now, I get it. He obviously has these missed cuts. I think he might be a member at this golf course as well, and I want to say it's been disappointing because of that. With the 2 missed cuts, I think a lot of people were on him during 2019 and 2018 because of that fact that he's a member at this course. But I think this year it's a little different. And we'll look more into Ryan Palmer a little bit later, but 3 top 10s, he has that scoring upside, and where he's priced in this, in this DK salaries, I think it's okay. 71.43% cut made percentage, I think it's okay. We see Ryan Moore once again up there, Jim Furyk, Jimmy Walker, a lot of the guys we talked about. We also see Jordan Spieth. Now, he had a 3-year lull, whatever you want to call it, between 2018 and 2016 where he didn't play this tournament. But he came back in 2019, finished 30th. He is a Texas native. This isn't, I'm guessing this isn't too far away from his hometown. Or obviously it's a home state. I'm not going to get into that narrative that this is a home field event for him, but I'm sure he's comfortable playing here. Some other notables: Brandon Grace, Kevin Chappell, and Chris Kirk. All plays I think are decent this week. Brandon Grace probably is really the guy who isn't really being talked about that much, but I've heard Chappell and Kirk already brought up in some of the podcast earlier today. So maybe Brandon Grace is the guy you pivot from when it comes to Chappell or Kirk. Up to you guys. But I think that's as long as I want to spend on course history. I don't care about really talking about cut made percentage because, well, how about this? We'll look at cut made percentage with more than 2 events played. Hoffman, 100% cut made percentage. Moore, 100%. Furyk, Kuchar, Grace, Putnam, Finau, Abraham Ancer, and Bryce Garnett all have 100% cut made percentage. Now, if you're one of those that believes that everything comes back to the mean, you're probably looking at this a little bit more pessimistically, as in you think it's bound to happen. These guys are going to miss a cut, especially those guys that have 7 events under their belt, Kuchar and Hoffman. Or perhaps this just gives you more confidence in rostering either of these 2 guys. And I don't think you can go wrong. So cut made percentage, those are your top guys. Brendan Steele kind of comes in second. Brendan Steele and Jimmy Walker both have 7 events under their belt, 85% cut made percentage. Chappell, Laird. We didn't talk about Martin Laird, but Martin Laird was the 20th person on the list. I mean, he ties Kevin Chappell with the best course history. Has won here before, has won earlier this year. So, don't sleep on Martin Laird. I think that's a decent play as well. Now we're done with course history. Let's go ahead and talk about recent form. So when we look at recent form, I am not including the WGC match play, primarily because it's hard to quantify what a 28th place finish compares to a 9th, or a 9th compares to a 2nd, because there are more holes that golfers play, the better their match place position is. So I have no idea how to quantify that. I'm not including it in on my recent form. In fact, when I hover over this, I guess you guys can't see it because the formula is in the way, but I'm only taking these tournaments into consideration. So we're looking at Corrales Punta Cana going all the way back to Pebble. I only look at the last 7 weeks when it comes to recent form because, to me, any swing changes, any swing thoughts are probably like anything that was from 2 months ago. Unless it's working, you're probably not remembering. So I think it takes about 2 months of either poor play or, anything past 2 months, I think kind of gets flushed out of your system. So I'm not really looking anything past there. So if you are the type that looks at the last 24 rounds a golfer played, just remember 24 rounds for some guys are the last 6, 7, 8 weeks. Some guys, that means it's the last 6 months. And that's something you have to understand. Personally, I'm not a guy who likes to look at the last 24 rounds when it comes to like golfers like Adam Scott, because they only play a limited amount of tournaments. And same goes with some of these other guys that pick and choose their tournaments. Very difficult to go with those types of stats. I like to keep it within a date range, obviously dating back 2 months in the past. So that's how I look at recent form. And like I said, I'm not including world match play. So ignoring that, your golfers with the best recent form, Jordan Spieth, Danny Willett, those are the only guys with 20, like their average finishing position over the last 7 weeks is 20 or better. Then we move on to basically your 20 to 40 range. Charlie Hoffman, Chris Kirk. I'm not going to talk about all these guys, but you can obviously see them on the screen. It helps me, like someone like Chris Kirk, even Alonto Griffin, any of these high price guys, gives me a little bit more confidence to play them. Akshay Bhatia has one finish, a 30th at Pebble, that puts him in this range. So that's another thing to look at. Maybe that's a column I'll add in the future, like total amount of tournaments that account for this recent form. But for the most part, just obviously look on the screen, see how many tournaments were played to get this recent form. I like someone like a Chase Seifert, $7,100, a bunch of top 20 finishes, and not at like a WGC event where there's only a limited field of like 60 some golfers. So having a top 20 in a full field event, that's pretty good. He was 3rd at the Honda, 18th at Corrales, 15th at Puerto Rico. Both those last 2 tournaments were alternate ones, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. I like Chase Seifert just based off of that. Then obviously Corey Connors, that's good to see. Obviously the 61st place finish at the WGC match play, not a big deal. Not a big deal. In fact, that kind of gives him some time to recover, work on his golf game. He doesn't have to go through the long weekend of playing match play, which obviously some of you guys watched. It was grueling. It really tired some of those guys out. So I'm okay with Corey Connors. I mean, a 7th, a 3rd, the last full field events he was at. I think that's pretty good. And then you can obviously see some of these other guys. Tony Finau's down here. Scotty Scheffler. He was throughout the week. I mean, he played throughout the weekend. He had the most, rounds of golf or holes under his belt. Him and Kuchar were tied, I think, in this field. In fact, let's look at everybody that was in the match play. This 3rd place and 2nd place, they obviously went to the semifinals. They played 7 rounds of golf, basically 7 rounds of golf. Both of those guys. So they might be fatigued. But like I said, Kuchar, here, let's look at this. In 2019, Kuchar did the same thing. And I actually have it already. I know you didn't see that, but you can see what the filter is. This is 2019's recent form page. And Kuchar finished 2nd at that World Match Play and finished 7th here. So when we come back to 2021, his 3rd place finish, who knows? Maybe he does finish inside the top 10 or maybe inside the top 20, which would justify his $9,000 price tag. The only thing I would say is look at his recent form prior to the World Match Play or WGC Match Play was not good. In 2019, it was a little bit better. No missed cuts. 31.50 was his recent form, so perhaps pump the brakes on Matt Kuchar. But let's open this back up to everybody. Obviously, pause the video if you want to see everyone that played in the World Match Play or the WGC Match Play. I think I keep saying world match play because I have the initials as WMP, but the initials are supposed to be WGC, or they're supposed to stand for WGC match play. Anyways, here's basically your top 20 golfers with the best recent form. I'm not going to talk about everybody here. I think maybe it's worthwhile going over salaries of the top guys, or going recent form over the top guys. So this is your top 20 salaries on DraftKings currently. I don't think any of those additions that were added today during the Monday qualifier, I think they're all going to be in the 6K range. So we don't have to worry about any of this changing here at the top. But when we look at this, things might stand out, like the 71.33 or the 67.25 for Kuchar and Siwoo Kim. But we're going to get into the bucket system, and it might paint a different picture, because some of our top 10s might come from this type of recent form average. So don't get deterred, but it's a good mix. We have, Jordan Spieth with top 20, or, an average finishing position of under 20 over the last 7 weeks, which is good. Finau's in there, we have a bunch of guys here in the yellow, and that's 20 to 40. So that 20 to 40 range, that was their average finishing position over the last 7 weeks. And then this orange is 40 to 60. So obviously we see 50.75 for Matsuyama, 41.67 for Answer, and 52 for Davis. Again, wait till the bucket system to determine if you want to stay away from those guys. One of these buckets, one of these average finishing positions, the ranges that I'm talking about, that 40 to 60, 20 to 40, when I go over that, the changes in colors represent different buckets. This might be one of the top buckets. You're going to have to wait and find out. So of all these guys, the only guys with 100% cut made percentage, Jordan Spieth, let me just highlight them here. Jordan Spieth, Ryan Palmer, Brendan Steele, Charlie Hoffman, Alonso Griffin, Chris Kirk, Zach Johnson, and Keegan Bradley. And I don't think you can go wrong with any of those guys. Obviously, we see a bunch of guys in the 8K range with 100% cut made percentage over the last 7 weeks. That might be enough to want to play them, honestly. And the cut made percentage does not include the WGC Workday Championship, primarily because that was a limited field. There was no cut. So I'm not going to include that in the numbers for cut made percentage. So that's what these numbers reflect. Okay, let's just jump into the bucket system. And normally what I would do is go to a page like this and try to, make sense to you guys, or try to explain it to you guys to make sense. But I found a better way. It's looking at a summary of that information. So we're going to start with course history, because that's what we started with. We're going to look at the course history buckets through this type of lens. And what this does is it gives you a ranking of the average finishing position for a course history. So you can see that on here, 1 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, so on and so forth. You can see the totals. And basically, okay, let me actually back up. Don't look at the totals yet. This bucket here is just looking at the top 10. And the bucket system was primarily created just to look at top 10 finishers and what their last week finishes were. Put them into buckets to try to differentiate my lineups, because obviously some of us, or people in this industry, like what I just did, go over the top course history, go over the top recent form, and basically try to build lineups around those guys. When in fact, that might be the wrong approach, because those types of golfers might disappoint more than they succeed. And this is what the bucket system helps determine. It is basically looking at the frequency of golfers inside the top 10 from the years 2013 to 2020 and what their average finishing position, basically, whether it's, if we're looking at course history, recent form, last year, last week, obviously use your brain to understand what that is. Course history is just looking at the average finishing position at this tournament going all the way back to 2013. And then with the totals is where the ranks come into play. So you can see we've only had a total of 4 golfers that came out of this course history bucket who had an average finishing position, average course history, somewhere between 1 and 20. Only 4. So the frequency is not high. Unlike, our number one course history bucket are golfers who have a course history between 40 and 60, an average finishing position at this tournament between 40 and 60. 17 golfers in that bucket. So we see way more golfers with this type of course history finish inside the top 10. So just by raw numbers alone, that's where the ranking comes in, but we can dive a little deeper with the rest of the information. So basically, of golfers who have a course history between 1 and 20, we typically only see 9 golfers in this bucket per year. 9.67. Of those 9.67, 8.1% finish inside the top 10, which isn't a really good number. When we see a lower number like this, if I were to see like a 20%, I'd feel way more comfortable targeting golfers with this type of course history, or the course history average. But 8.16% inside the top 10 is not good. And any given year, dating back to 2013, we haven't seen more than one guy finish inside the top 10 with this type of course history. So basically, don't target golfers with the best course history. It will backfire in the end. Now, to go a little bit deeper, we can look at top 5 frequencies and top 20 frequencies. Top 20 is what I'd feel more comfortable with. 10.78%, that's not terrible. I can also go here to cut made percentage. Nearly 60%. So it's definitely the best bucket to find golfers who make the cut. But if you're looking to win a GPP, this isn't the bucket you want to choose from. And that's basically how I want you to look at the stats that you see on the screen. Our number one bucket is that 40 to 60. And I kind of mentioned that, or I alluded it to in the recent form portion of this video. We're probably going to find some of the guys, within that range of course history, 40 to 60. Remember, that's their average finishing position. We want to target those guys. We have 17 total. From 2013 to 2020, we haven't seen less than 2 show up inside the top 10 at any given year. That's consistency. We've also only seen a max of 5. So that means throughout each of those years, we haven't seen more than 5. Gives us an 11.33% top 10 percentage. Not the greatest, but when we're looking at usually 30 golfers in this bucket a year, we need to find 3. 10% of those guys, just find 3 guys to make up your lineup. In fact, obviously you can see the average per year, and then you can see what's this year. We have 5 more golfers in this bucket. I think we're going to find nearly 3 of those guys. So definitely, I think target guys with that 40 to 60, find 3. Again, minimum's 2. So if you're not comfortable with 3, go down to 2. That's fine. But select, start here. Look at your 40 to 60, or maybe even your 20 to 40, because again, we see no less than 2 per year in this bucket at a 14% clip of finding the top 10. And this bucket's even smaller. Typically, we see 20 per year. We have 20 in the field this year. Basically, 15% of 20. That's hovering somewhere between 2 and 3. Actually, that's 3, right? That's exactly 3. I think that's another good bucket to choose from. So I would look at course history between 20 and 40 and 40 to 60. I'm not going to talk about the rest of the buckets. You can see what they are on the screen. You can see the top 20 frequency. Again, your number one bucket, 40 to 60, shows up the most, 22.94% inside the top 20. So if you're trying to roster guys in the 6K range or even the 7K range with that type of course history, that is a perfect reason to do so. Let's go ahead and look at recent form, since that was the next thing we talked about. Your number one bucket are golfers between the 20 and 40 range. We've seen 24 total golfers inside the top 10 within this bucket. And at the very least, we've seen 3 per year. That also coincides with this 40 to 60. It's actually a tie between those two, but I always give the edge to the finishing range that's better. So the 20 to 40 in this case, I give that one a little leg up. Also, when we look at top 10%, like the percentage that any of these buckets show up inside the top 10, 19.67% is the clip for golfers in this range of finishing inside the top 10. That's pretty good. And also another good thing is we normally see 20.5 golfers per year in this bucket. We have 22 this year, so pretty darn close. There isn't really a change. With that type of clip of 20%, we can basically start our lineups anywhere between 3 to 5 of these guys. And also, when it comes to recent form, our bucket 2 golfers, again, we see the min-max like that, but we typically see 50 golfers in this bucket. We only see 41 this year, which is good. It's a little bit of a drop in volume. It's good and it's bad. If 7% is our clip, perhaps this is a bucket that's just based off of volume. And if that's the case, we probably want to somewhat knock this bucket down a peg or two. I wouldn't say, disregard it, but I feel like the reason we see such a high clip of golfers inside the top 10 in this bucket is because we have a high volume of golfers. So I would probably refrain, but it also has a pretty decent cut made percentage. 60.77 is good. I see one here at 64%, and that is our recent form bucket 5 golfers, which fall in that 1 to 20 range. Remember, we only have 2 golfers this year, and we already went over them. Jordan Spieth is in that bucket. It's a 12% clip of finding the top 10. And we have had years where we've seen 0. And at max, we've seen 2. Again, we only see an average of 3.86, so it would be really odd to see more than 2. If we saw 3, it would be like, okay, this is actually a bucket you really want to choose from. But, when it comes to top 10%, 12, not the greatest. Likewise, top 5%. So I'm going to go back to the recent form. 10-7 is difficult to wrap around. Or wrap my head around, because if we are looking at 8% top 5 frequency for golfers in this bucket, 10-7, that's not good enough for me. If this was like, say 12 to 14%, kind of like what we saw with the course history bucket, I guess not with top 5. Yeah, I think I was confusing that with top 10. So I guess it's not terrible. Personally, I want to see more golfers in this bucket. So if you are on Jordan Spieth, I'm not going to try to tell you not to play him based off these numbers. For me, it drops him down a little bit because it doesn't provide me any comfort, especially when I don't know this golf course well enough to tell you to play Jordan Spieth or not. At the Players Championship, where there's a lot of water around, that was, definitely a course you want to avoid someone like Jordan Spieth, who sprays the golf ball off the tee all over the place. Actually, what did we see for rough? 2 inches. That is not thick whatsoever. So that actually helps someone like Jordan Spieth, who sprays the golf ball all over the place. And if it is going to be windy, I also like Jordan Spieth even more because of that. So I think for me, looking at this type of bucket, all it does to me is kind of give me caution to play Jordan Spieth. I might actually avoid him in my strategy, which I'm going to deploy the 30-30-30-10 method, which is 30% of my, I'm basically going to grab 3 duos and play each of those duos in 30% of my lineups. And then that 10% is just going to be FOMO lineups. And I think that's where I'm going to find Jordan Spieth, is in 10%. And it's going to probably be less than 10%. So I might even play him in 4 to 6% of my lineups. In fact, I like using this number for my maximum ownership. So maybe my maximum ownership is going to be 12% for Jordan Spieth. And if the optimizer puts me on him 12%, that's fine. I'm okay with 12 of those lineups being Jordan Spieth. But I don't like the rest of these numbers. So the cut made percentage is good. For me, I like Danny Willett. You know, obviously if we're using the recent form page and we're looking at the only 2 guys that fit in that bucket, I like Danny Willett. $7,700, has been playing good. I don't have anything to worry really about Danny Willett spraying the golf ball all over the place. Just coming off an 8th place finish, 31st at the API, that's not terrible. I don't mind someone like Danny Willett, especially when the cut made percentage is 64%. That's pretty high. That's good. Obviously, 12.61% is not good for golfers who did not play. Usually we see 17 golfers in the field. We only see 8 this year. And that's just because, I mean, if you think about it, golfers who don't have recent form, you know, up until this point are probably, oh, I'm sorry. I got to put my blanks here. Golfers without recent form are these types of golfers here. You know, golfers who are Monday qualifiers or coming in with some kind of tournament exemption or sponsor exemption, that kind of thing. Who are not regulars on the PGA Tour. So you could probably ignore some of those guys and be okay with it. So yeah, that is your course history in recent form. Now let's get into last week. We're not going to talk about last year because last year, obviously we didn't have a tournament in 2020. So we're not going to go over last year buckets. But last week buckets. This does not include the match play. Once again, match play is on its own. That's not included in on these top 10 frequencies, any of these frequencies. So ignore what this means for match play golfers. But for those at the Kraus Punta Cana, this is going to, it's going to match up with them. So in fact, actually some of the match play guys are going to be, they're going to be in this bucket. So if I actually go to the 2021 DK page, obviously Tony Finau played last week. He played in the match play, but he's going to be under this bucket last week once. Because I don't know how to, again, I don't know how to normalize that data. I have no idea what type of finish at a match play, how it correlates with a finish in a stroke play event. I don't know. So I'm not going to try to guess. This is kind of going to be a little trial and error. We'll try to figure it out, but just note, match play guys are going to be included in on this bucket. And I might have to change. Let me double check something. What I'm trying to do right now is find like a Matt Kuchar. So last week I had as a 2. Yeah, so I messed that up. The good news is 2019 was the only year the World Mat or the WGC match play was played before the Valero Texas Open. So it's not really going to skew the results all that much. I'll have to look into it and I'll tweet something out if I find something really egregious that we need to fix or correct. But either way, your number 1 bucket for last week buckets are golfers who did not play. We've seen 35 of these golfers inside the top 10 from 2013 to 2020. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, no, never mind. Again, I was just about to mention it was the WGC match play, but in 2018 it was the RBC Heritage. In 2017 it was the Heritage again. 2016 was also the RBC Heritage. So you can see that it's kind of changed positions on the calendar. So yeah, no, this is actually a very legit bucket. There is no hidden numbers in this bucket. That's kind of what I was a little confused with. 35. But on average, we see nearly 71 golfers in this bucket. This year we have 84. We haven't seen less than 3 on any given year inside this bucket, inside the top 10. That's not going to change because I'm sure we're going to see some of the match play guys finish inside the top 10. I'm going to say a max of 2. We're not going to see more than 2 match play guys inside the top 10. But I think this number, you're pretty safe to bet that there will be a minimum of 3 guys in this bucket inside the top 10. So go ahead, target your match play guys, target guys who've not played, either at match play or the Punta Cana Championship. Definitely consider those guys. Your number 2 bucket, golfers who finish in that 1 to 20 range. So again, this is just looking at Kraus Punta Cana for this year. So anyone that fits in that bucket, we usually see 12.43 per year. We have 15 this year. We do have a minimum of 0, which means we have seen 0 show up inside the top 10 over the last, 8 years, basically 7 years since we didn't have a tournament last year. Meaning it's kind of a volatile bucket. Sure, there's a 16.09. That's really high. 16.09% clip of finishing inside the top 10. Yeah, that might give me a little bit more confidence to play this group. We're looking at somewhere between 1 to 2 golfers for sure that we want to kind of, target around. Which all that really does for me is it eyes, for me, it gives more confidence in playing someone like a Danny Willett or a Sam Ryder. I mean, those are probably my only 2 guys that I really like. Chase Seifert, no problem there. But this is your group of golfers that, I would pick 1 to 2 of these guys and select them, and target your line or build your lineups around those guys, or put them in a percentage. I'm going to only play X amount of this, X amount of that kind of thing. But this is your group. There's only 15 guys in this group. You can see who they are on the screen. There are some good names in there. Most of them, though, I guess, what is the max salary? $8,200. Your winner from last week, Joel Damon. And then $7,400 is your next price guy with Sam Ryder. Yeah, so Sam Ryder, Chase Seifert, even Johnny Vegas, those are guys that I would not mind, anchoring my lineups around. I know it sounds weird with 7K guys, but that's what I like about the bucket system. It kind of provides that type of information. So again, you can see some of the numbers up here, your top buckets with top 20 frequencies. Last week finishes between 1 to 20, and last week finishes between 40 and 60. Those are pretty high, 25 and 28% respectively. Given that your last week bucket 4 golfers, we normally only see 13. We have 11 this week. And if at 25% finishing inside the top 20, that's nearly, that's about 2 golfers, 3 golfers. Can I do math? Yeah, it's 2.5 golfers. Well, no, it's going to be like 3 golfers. You want to select around 3 golfers, maybe out of this bucket for top 20 frequency. Cut made percentage, there really isn't anything that kind of jumps off the table. 42% is not really good, but we're going to find a lot of golfers who miss the cut here. So I don't really worry that much. So basically with the bucket system, it kind of gives you an idea who to anchor your lineups around. Again, you have the ranges here. So at any point in this video, you could have, or you can pause the video. So you can rewind, pause the video, go on DraftKings if that's how you build lineups, if you hand build lineups, and just look, for last week, what was their finishing position and where did they fall? And from that, you can see what the top 10 frequency is. You can see what the top 5 frequency is, top 20, and the cut made percentage. These are all frequencies that I'm showing you guys right there. So you guys can build your lineups that way. I highly recommend it. It has provided a lot of success for me, and I think it will do the same for you. Now, the last piece of information, usually this is the first thing I talk about, is historical salaries. I want to know, are the favorite golfers at any given tournament, or at this week's tournament, are the favorites, do they perform well? Do the favorites perform well? Or is this mostly dominated by golfers in the 7 and 8K range? So you can see I have all of this, the positions and salaries next to them over here. Everything on the left of it basically pulls in that data right there. You can kind of see like popular salaries within the top 10, popular salaries within the top 5. And again, top 5 finishes. So looking back to 2017, of salaries inside the top 5, we see 9,400 twice, which is weird. It's a weird number. I mostly look at this to see price ranges. 9,400, 91. How many 9K golfers do I see up here? Different 9K, a total of 3, because I'm taking their counts, right? How many top, 10K and above? 3. I also can look at the top 5 here and count how many 10K, 9K, whatever. You know, mostly I see 8K up in the top here. 82, 84, 82. And a bunch of 7K. But instead of, you know, eyeballing it this way, I have kind of your summary over here. So you can see what the average salary is for the winner. Basically, just take these columns and look down, you know, cross-reference them across. That will give you average salary per top 5, so on and so forth. To me, one of the interesting things to look at is top 10. Again, here at SweetSpotDFS, I'm looking for optimal lineups, and the only way to do it is finding the most golfers inside the top 10 you can. $7,800. That is the average salary inside the top 10. DraftKings allows you $8,300 average per player to roster your lineups with. When this number is below 83, that tells me you can, for one of two things, you can leave a lot of money on the table, and most of the favorites do poorly at this tournament because the DraftKings algorithm when it comes to salaries is largely based off of the odds for those golfers. So that's the first thing I look at. I don't mind this information. To me, it's become more noise than anything. Basically, what it's telling you, you know, these two columns here is looking at every golfer. So when I look at the top 10 percentages, or basically I'm looking at the top 10 in this column and their percentage based off of how many golfers are in that range versus the rest of the salary ranges. That's it. So when we're looking at 6K golfers, 32% of our top 10 finishers fall in that 6K bucket. 26.47% fall in the 7K bucket, pricing bucket. So between the two of those, we have a total of 58, nearly 60% of our golfers fall within those two buckets, meaning you're going to need 6 and 7K golfers this week, which almost goes every single week. But the thing is, when we look at 11K and above, 2.94% inside the top 10. That's not good. That's not good at all. When it's kind of looking at everybody, or every price bucket inside the top 10. You can also see top 20, and you can see the same numbers kind of are reflective of that. We see a lot of 6K golfers inside the top 20, also inside the top 10. But that doesn't tell the whole picture, because coming down here, we can see each price bucket, each pricing bucket, and their top 10 frequency and their top 20 frequency. So this is just looking at golfers within that bucket and how often, what's the frequency they finish inside the top 10 or top 20. So you can see it looks a little bit better for 11K and above golfers finishing inside the top 20, which isn't good. That doesn't help us win a GPP. Inside the top 10 does, but when it's 11K and above, we really want to focus on top 5 finishes, and we see 0%. So Tony Finau is the only 11K golfer and above this week because obviously Dustin Johnson withdrew. I don't like those chances. In fact, he might be also in the FOMO lineups. Of the 30-30-30-10, he's going to be inside that 10%. So not good when it's looking at my lineups that way. Or I should say my lineups. Just not looking good for 11K golfers. We can also see the 10K to 11K. So it's not terrible. You know, almost 10% top 5 finish. That's not terrible. 27% to find the top 10. Again, not terrible. Actually, it's the number 1 ranked bucket when it comes to top 10 finishes. So at least the percentage based off of its own bucket, the totals inside its bucket. So that's good. And then 54.55 inside the top 20. That's not bad. It's not bad. 10K golfers, we do want to see inside the top 10 more than we do top 20. It's not going to help us having a 10K guy, somewhere between 13th and 20th place. It's not going to help. But, when we look at our 7 and 6K ranges, obviously those are high frequency buckets that finish inside the top 10 based off of these numbers here. But when it comes to looking at every golfer in that bucket, when we have something like 250 or 100 guys in a bucket and we see over 10%, that's usually good. You know, if you do have convictions of playing someone in the 7K or in the 6K, go with them. Do not hesitate. 6 and 7K ranges are where you want to be looking at for the bulk of your lineups. Now, just also a reminder, 12.9% and 10.2 for 4%, you know, there's a lot of volatility with those percentages. And that is actually just top 20. When it comes to top 10, it gets less. So, you know, 4.3 for 6K, hard to anchor your lineups around, but if there's any little bit of confidence to play them, it's that it goes up considerably for top 20s. And I actually should have included a cut made percentage for this because it might provide a little bit more comfort for some of you guys to grab a group or not. But again, I'm only focusing on top 10 finishes, so therefore I really only care about top 10%. And if there's a bucket to really focus around, 10K, 9K, 8K, you know, that's pretty good. So I would definitely start there. You know, when we look at everybody, you know, in this field and we're looking down, you know, if we're looking for a 10K golfer, we only have 3 this year. You know, Hideki Matsuyama, Scotty Scheffler, Jordan Spieth. All 3 of them played in the match play. Hideki was the only one that was, you know, booted out from the group play. Otherwise, Jordan made it an extra round, and obviously Scotty made it all the way through. Finau was also booted from groups. I mean, he was done after group play. He did not make it to the next round. So that also might help him. It might be worth, you know, anchoring some of your lineups around these guys or just bypass it altogether. Perhaps it's better to anchor your lineups around anyone in the 9K range. I mean, if we're using that same match play logic, then stay away from Matt Kuchar. And maybe go around these guys. I mean, lineups this week are going to be very interesting to make, especially going over all this information. Personally, I don't have an extreme amount of confidence when it comes to anchor. You know, when it comes to finding my 3 duo partners, basically what I'm going to do is like grab a Tony Finau and pair him up with like a Charlie Hoffman. And then that will be one duo. I'll make 30 lineups with just those 2 guys in it and let the optimizer do the rest of the work. And then I might grab Jordan Spieth and Cameron Davis, which I already told you Jordan is going to be in my FOMO lineup. So instead of Jordan, maybe I do Scotty Scheffler and Cam Davis. And those will be my second duo in 30 lineups. And then maybe I grab, maybe I grab Hoffman and Tringali. And just go 9K and maybe not touch the 10K and see what spits out for lineups with 30 of 30 lineups with those 2 guys anchoring those lineups. So I haven't determined where I want to go. There are a lot of golfers that I do like. You know, Chris Kirk is one of them. Charlie Hoffman, Cam Davis. Those are other guys. I do like Ryan Palmer. He also was booted out of or from group play. He did not make it past group play, I should say. I keep saying booted out of group play like he, you know, did something wrong or any of these guys did. They just didn't make it past group play. So we have those guys. A lot of people are on Sam Burns. He's actually in a recent form bucket that's not terrible. You know, if we go back to the recent form buckets, he's in that 40 to 60, which is bucket 2. Recent form bucket 2. So, you know, Sam Burns might be a good play. Also to note, a lot of people have already mentioned this in the DFS industry. Ricky Fowler needs to win this week in order to get into the Masters next week. So I mean, there's a narrative to play Ricky, and he's in that 60 to 80 recent form bucket. He's also in that top 20 course history bucket. So I guess let's see what that looks like. So recent form, he's in that 60 to 80. That's bucket 3. 3.82% top 10 percentage, not good. 2.08%, not good. And this is out of normally 48 guys, and we have 51. So pretty darn close to that average. it's not looking good for Ricky, just based off of the recent form bucket he's in. And then course history, you know, he's in this top 20, 8.1%, 8.16% inside the top 10, 6.12% inside the top 5. Again, it's really not looking good for Ricky to win this tournament. Hopefully, I mean, I like him. He's a cool guy. Maybe he can change, you know, turn it around and win this tournament to get in the Masters. But, you know, the bucket system does not like him. So, or does not like his chances. Let's put it that way. I'm not going to talk about other guys down here. I would definitely check in with the strategy video tomorrow. Basically, what I'm going to be covering in the strategy video, I am going to take a more specific, you know, this is more of a wide angle look. That'll definitely be a more narrow angled look at building lineups, or at concentrating on certain golfers. We'll look at strokes gained buckets. We'll look at tee time pairings. We'll look at several pieces of information to really narrow down our player pools and anchor around certain golfers. So definitely stay tuned for the strategy video, which will come out tomorrow. One other piece of, I guess, noteworthy news. Wednesday, I will be traveling to San Diego, and I'll spend the weekend at a wedding. So I don't know exactly how available I will be for any kind of questions or anything like that. Also, I should say this. It's probably going to delay some of my responses to you guys. So I forgot to mention there's a giveaway at the beginning of this video. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm providing my optimizer. If you've seen it in, you know, any of the other tournaments that I've covered, previews or course history, or not course history, but strategy videos, you can find the optimizers in those if you want to take a look at it. But in order to get it for this week and also Masters Week, you need to subscribe to the channel. You need to like the video. You need to comment in the comment section below and reach out to me at SweetSpotDFS@gmail.com and ask, or basically let me know you're interested in the optimizer, and I will send it your way. I will have the optimizer updated tomorrow evening. So if you do reach out to me either later tonight or tomorrow morning, I'll get back to you in the evening. Actually, I'll get back to you right away, but I won't have the optimizer ready for you until the evening. So those are the only steps. If you're on Twitter, you can bypass a lot of that by liking my tweet and retweeting it. But if I was to give you a preference, I'd rather you like the YouTube video. Just gets me out there a little bit more. But yeah, those are your options to get that optimizer. And that's all I have for you for this preview video. So it ran a little long, but it was pretty good. Pretty good. Let me know what you thought in the comment section. That could be your comment. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the strategy video tomorrow. All right, bye.